What's up, y'all? It's VZ me back with another video. Y'all see the thumbnail? Y'all see the title? Let's get right to it. Let's go.
The Democrats in the House of Representatives are not only pushing back against the disinformation by the MAGA Republicans. What I like is that this new class of Democrats is going on the offense and calling out the MAGA Republicans at each and every committee hearing. At the most recent committee hearing, where MAGA Republicans tried to trash the concept of telework, first you have Jasmine Crockett, Democratic Congresswoman, says, well, let's be clear. The MAGA Republicans eliminated telework here in the House of Representatives, and looks like we've had the most unproductive House of Representatives in the history of the United States of America. So if you are trying to base your view that teleworking doesn't work based on what we do here in Congress, I think you should think again. Watch this clip.
But you know, it's interesting because we've had so many conversations about telework and the evils of telework. And it seems to be this other false equivalency that if you telework, that means you're not working, instead of this idea that people are actually just working and they're not working in the building that is being paid for by the federal government. In fact, my mom is on telework, and my mom is absolutely one of the smartest people that I know. And so it always hits me a little differently every time we dump on those that are teleworking for the federal government. But interestingly enough, we're not allowed to telework here. We have to show up. There is no remote voting anymore. But even though we show up, are you aware of the fact that this has been the most unproductive Congress in the history of the Congress?
Congressman, I'll leave that judgment to
okay,
members
well,
of
I'll tell you, it
media.
is, and I've got some numbers for you. So to me, you can show up and still not do a daggone thing. And so it's rich that we have so many opinions to give you and to tell you how to do your job, but seemingly we're not doing ours. Thus far, only 1% of legislation that has been introduced has been passed in this Congress versus the last Congress, where it was 6 points higher, and the Congress before that 6 points higher, and the Congress before that 7 points higher. There is no other Congress that has been least productive. And guess what? The last Congress, they could vote remotely, and somehow they figured out how to get it done. So I would just say that we need to be very mindful of when we decide to throw stones, because we may reside in a glass house. Thank you so much for your work.
And then Democratic Congress member Jared Moskowitz, he says, look, y'all Republicans are saying Congress and government needs to be more like business. It needs to be run like a private corporation. By the way, hopefully not a Trump private corporation, because you saw what's going on with Trump media. In the last quarter alone, it lost over $320 million net loss, and only made about $700,000 in revenue. I mean, everything this guy touches essentially goes bankrupt, or at least most or a lot of the companies that he's touched has gone bankrupt, and Trump media is just doing disastrously in terms of its revenue. But here you have Democratic Congress member Jared Moskowitz say, okay, well, private business has more telework than we have here, so wouldn't your logic apply, or are y'all just hypocritical on everything? And when you just want to say how you cause people to just be annoyed more and try to inconvenience people's lives more or take away people's rights, that's where you ultimately side with. Watch Democratic Congress member Jared Moskowitz at this moment play this clip.
That report, which is the congressional report from the CBO, it specifically shows the difference between the private sector and the federal government when it comes to teleworking. There's a chart which I have behind me, and you know, I'm not going to do what Trump did and just circle Alabama, but I am going to circle that area right there, right? So we always constantly hear that we should run government like a business. This seems to show, according to the congressional report, our report from April, just a month ago, that the private sector is teleworking more than federal employees. Is that what this chart shows?
Congressman, that's how I read that chart, yes.
Oh my God. So the federal government is actually outpacing the private sector. I'm sorry, the private sector is actually outpacing us in teleworking. I mean, you think like my colleagues should file like a resolution of disapproval of the private sector because of all of this teleworking that the private sector is doing?
Anyone want to start?
On the other hand, while you have all of this going on, you've got the MAGA Republicans holding an event in the Bronx for Donald Trump, where George Santos is walking around getting greeted by all of the MAGA red hats. Watch this. You then have all the MAGA rappers out. I'm not going to even play this clip. It's atrocious. But you have the MAGA Republicans like destroying a COVID testing center, like just physically ripping it up. I don't need to play the video. You get what it will say. I want to show you this clip, though, right here. Another clip of Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. And here she says, look, it seems that what my colleagues are trying to say, that you either have diversity or you have qualifications. And in fact, you could be both diverse and have the qualifications. So enough of this just racist garbage that you're throwing our way. Watch what Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has to say. Play this clip.
And you engaged in an exchange earlier with one of my colleagues, and I don't know if you recall, but it was hitting me a little differently as a Black woman sitting here, because it almost seemed as if you either get diversity or you get qualifications. It did not seem as if my colleague understood that someone can be diverse and qualified. And it is why you have people like me that get very frustrated, not just in the halls of Congress, but in general in this country. Because as I'm sitting here, and there seemed to be this question of you're either diverse or you're qualified, all I could think about was the fact that I currently hold an honorary doctorate. I also hold a Juris Doctorate. I also hold a bachelor's. I also technically hold the rank of Lieutenant Colonel in the Civil Air Patrol, and I actually practiced law for almost 2 decades, in addition to serving on various boards, in addition to being a prior state lawmaker. And there are those that would make some people believe that because I happen to be Black and or a woman, that somehow, even though I can rattle off all the qualifications in the world, my Blackness makes me unqualified.
Bond charge, it's a holistic wellness brand. Red is with these red gets nice and bring professionals and ice like outs to 52. He goes, look, me IDAS to say Skowitz. This is a funny moment where he goes, look, I have to slightly disagree with what Congresswoman Crockett said earlier in the day, where she said that this was an unproductive Congress. Congressmember Moskowitz goes, look at all the things that we've done. We've removed the speaker, 15 rounds of votes to remove the speaker or to elect the speaker. What are you talking? This seems pretty productive to me. It's being sarcastic, of course. Watch this.
And, you know, this is going to be, it's a little awkward when you want to disagree with someone on your side of the aisle, but I have to dramatically disagree with my colleague, Ms. Crockett, who used data and statistics and facts to claim that this is the least productive Congress in modern history. First of all, this Congress removed the speaker, okay, which has never happened in the history of the Republic. That's clearly that's a big accomplishment in the 118th. This Congress took 15 rounds to even elect that speaker that they then removed, right, which was historic in its own right. And then they removed a member of their own party. That hadn't happened in 20 years, so kudos to them. They've had a failed impeachment of a president. I don't think we've seen that happen in a really long time. This Congress did impeach a cabinet secretary, though, without meeting any constitutional threshold. We haven't seen that happen in 150 years. This Congress wants to hold Merrick Garland in contempt and then possibly arrest him. I don't think we've ever seen that in the history of the Republic. We've seen a failed motion to vacate to remove a second speaker, again, history in the 118th. And who could forget that this Congress, on behalf of the American people, saved gas stoves and ovens and toasters and blenders and dishwashers from the communist grip of energy standards. So I think Ms. Crockett was pointing out that this is least productive. These seem to be accomplishments on behalf of the American people that are clearly historic and may never be repeated in another Congress.
Back to Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Play this clip.
But in this particular set of circumstances, we know that if somebody shoots at me, in fact, some would argue that last week I had a colleague that decided she wanted to shoot at me, I'm going to shoot back. And that's what happened here. But what's more frustrating for me in this hearing, and what seems to be a pattern, is that we continue to attempt to litigate pending cases. We saw that we had one of the witnesses in the Trump trial. He came and testified before us last week, and then he went and testified this week in front of the judiciary. And then we know that this is still a pending case, and I do want to afford an opportunity for those that will be granted access to discovery, video, whatever video doesn't exist, as well as any statements, depositions, all those things. Some folk that have access to all the information, and ultimately, if this needs to go to court, having a jury that will make a decision based upon the facts and the evidence.
And here we have Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia, and he's talking about, look, all we hear from MAGA Republicans is a constant attack on federal workers, a constant attack on civil servants. And what this is really all about is the MAGA Project 2025 plan of basically destroying the federal government and anointing an emperor, anointing a king, anointing a dictator. Here, play this clip.
I served as mayor of Long Beach 2 years ago before I got to Congress. We had 6,000 employees that I was proud to help lead. Most of them civil servants doing hard work, firefighters, public works officers, folks that are filling out potholes in our health department. My concern is with this constant attack on federal workers and the civil servants. Where are the hearings on the private sector? Where are the hearings on these massive, large corporations that are not providing protections for workers? And I'm especially concerned with my colleagues and their mentions earlier of what Donald Trump's plans are for the civil service, for his plans, and essentially creating a mini army within the federal bureaucracy to lay out what he wants to see and his view of the government. We already know that he said he wants to be a dictator on day one. We know he wants to wipe out civil servants' legal protections. He talks about draining the swamp, yet he is the swamp. He wants to create this entirely different version of the federal workforce, which we strongly oppose. And this is the same person who we all know has stolen, in our opinion, millions of dollars from foreign governments, is trading favors to big oil for what he's going to do when he's back in the White House. So he has no interest in the law, in the Constitution, and importantly, in protecting the civil servants that make our government work every single day.
So while you have the Democrats saying that, oh, by the way, you know how I've been reporting that you've got all the MAGA Republicans who show up at these events now wearing the diapers, and Snopes has fact-checked it as true. They've got their pee funnels where they pee on the ground during Donald Trump's speech. Apparently they don't have porta potties. Look, I get if you gotta go, you gotta go. One of the new things that they are showing off at these Trump events are tattoos. And here's a person who's pulling down her pants, apparently, at a New Jersey Trump rally to show off her Trump P-word grabbing themed tattoo. Folks, this is the modern day Republican Party for you. And then you have, Ted Cruz, who's representative of this movement, cowardly Ted Cruz, who went on CNN and won't even say that 2020 was a free and fair election. Just continues. Just watch him on the CNN interview, how pathetic it is. Play this clip.
To ignore fraud,
but was there
regardless
fraud
of what
in 2020?
Of course there was fraud in 2020.
No, there wasn't, and you still objected.
You know for a fact there was zero voter fraud. Really? What's your basis for that? Show me your evidence.
We've spoken with Governor Kemp. They did 3 hand recounts in the state of Georgia. The director of CISA said that it was the safest, most legitimate election.
But you're saying zero voter fraud occurred. That's what you just said.
Nothing that would have changed the outcome of that
Okay, but that's a
election.
different statement.
But no, it's not, because if
yes,
it wouldn't have changed
You said there was no voter fraud.
there was no voter fraud that would have changed the outcome of the election, and you know that, Senator.
So what I know is that what I stood on the Senate floor and objected, what I called for, I'll tell you, I wrestled with what to do in that circumstance. And the reason I wrestled with it is because I think there was significant voter fraud in 2020.
Here's one more clip of that interview with Ted Cruz. So pathetic.
11 senators joined me.
Senator, with all due respect, after it had been thrown out of many courts, after the Attorney General Bill Barr, because there was no basis for those court cases.
No, so that's actually
Senator,
not.
With all due respect,
you asked me a question. Do you want me to answer it?
and you didn't answer the question.
Yes, I
Dozens of court
did.
cases were thrown out.
Hold on a
The Attorney
second.
General said there was no widespread fraud. You're not clearly answering the question. I want to thank you for that.
What question am I not? I'm answering every question. I think the country would have been a lot better off with a determination of what evidence of voter fraud there was that occurred, and instead the media didn't want to hear it and insists voter fraud never occurs. You ought to go back and look at the Carter Baker Commission.
It was the Attorney General, and my question was about 2024.
It was the media. It was CNN that relentlessly pushed that propaganda. And by the way,
what
never
propaganda?
holds.
That there was no widespread fraud in the election?
That voter fraud doesn't exist, and anyone who says it does is wearing a tinfoil hat. That is propaganda. And by the way, you never asked Hillary Clinton this. You never asked Stacey Abrams this. You never asked Al Gore this.
With all due respect,
and every
Senator,
one of them said the Republicans who won were illegitimate.
I haven't had any of them on my show. We'll talk to them, but I don't.
By the way, then you have all the MAGA Republican Congress members like Lauren Boebert and others saying, look at all this money we've secured for our districts. Here's a $51.4 million for Southbridge. We're thrilled to hear about the nearly $30 million in cost savings in addition. Y'all didn't support this. You voted against the Infrastructure Act. You voted against the Inflation Reduction Act. These are things you voted against. That's MAGA Republicans for you, led by MAGA Mike Johnson. Here he is, the MAGA Speaker of the House. And MAGA Mike Johnson's asked a very basic question. Look, you and the red tie brigade, you apparently get your outfits from Dictators R Us. Donald Trump dresses you up. He makes you wear Trump ties with Donald Trump's face on it. Y'all are there while other MAGA Republicans are releasing penis balloons into the courthouse. Like that's the level of maturity of these MAGA Republicans. This is what you're doing in the courthouse. And then the question's like, okay, you claim to be like a Christian, you claim to follow the Bible, and this is what what do you think about this? Like, this is a hush money case about paying off porn stars. Like, I'm not going to answer that. I can't answer those questions. Here, play this clip.
This is very clear about your disdain for the hush money case, but what about the underlying alleged conduct of paying off a porn star to keep this election allegedly quiet? You're a deeply religious man, a moral man. Does that alleged conduct cause you any concern about the former president's character?
Look, I'm not going to comment on that. What we've said about what's happening in Manhattan is I've called it a disgrace because it is. It's clearly lawfare. They're clearly going after President Trump because of who he is. Because he is he'll soon to be officially the nominee of the Republican Party for president of the United States. They've had him tied up for weeks in a courthouse when he should be out, have the ability to speak freely in the campaign and to be around the country. This is clearly by design. These prosecutors in these various locations have coordinated with the Department of Justice in Washington. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody. If you look at this objectively, there's no way to look at this in any other way. The case is patently absurd. You've had every legal analyst across the board acknowledge as much. It needs to be handled quickly, and I hope that he will be fully acquitted there and we can move forward. But the damage has been done. They're doing real damage to our system of justice itself.
So cowardly, so weak, and just so utterly bizarre. But I want to show you the contrast right there. You can see it for yourself. I'm Ben Meiselas from the...
There y'all have it, man. Jasmine Crockett at it again. I love her so much. Thank you for Midas Touch. I keep dropping Jasmine Crockett videos. I love it so much. I got way more videos to do, y'all. I'm gonna get out of here. I love y'all. Make sure y'all like the video. If you like the video, subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. On our way to 1 million. Thank you for all your support. Hit the notification bell so you're notified when I upload. Y'all love y'all. Peace and love, baby. And we are.